You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Gene Sullivan, broadcasting from the True North Painting Studios. Also brought to you by American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency, and Extreme Exteriors. Before we get back into our last segment here and story, I want to let our listeners know that we've got a great resource and gift just for you. We do a bi-monthly newsletter called What's New. A lot of what you'll hear on our show, we offer in further detail in that newsletter. People that you hear on our show also are presenters and writers for that newsletter too. It's yours free for the asking. Give us a call at New Concepts at 952-922-2500. Ask for Lori. She'll make sure that you start receiving that newsletter either electronically or by mail. If you're just joining us, I'm talking about this story from Las Vegas, Nevada. A homeowner gets this notice after living in an association for 11 years. The board said, hey, 2 trees needed to be planted in the front yards of every home in this association. Yours did not have the 2 trees, and you need to put them there. And he said, hey, wait a minute. I bought this from the developer. It's been 11 years. Nobody said anything up until now. And so we were talking about that issue, board, before you begin to start enforcing something that you notice is in your governing documents that you may not have been paying attention to for years and years. Before you do that, you need to first stop and ask the question, is this a big deal to anyone? Are there other people that are complaining and think that it needs to be enforced? And so the first thing a board needs to do is maybe take a look and say, hey, if it's in the governing documents, maybe we should look at changing the governing documents because it's no big deal and you can do it and change it. But what happens if the board finds out it is a big deal? Let's say a majority of the homeowners in the association say, no, we want everybody to have some uniformity, and we want everybody to have 2 trees planted in their front yards. Well, if that's the issue, how do you deal with a situation where a guy purchased into the association, and now 11 years later, you got to say, whoops, we have been paying attention, but this needs to be done. Well, I think this board did it right. They asked him to come in for a meeting with the board of directors, and what they finally did is they said, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a conditional variance. As long as you live on the property, we're not going to expect or demand that you do that because that wasn't what you were told. That's not your understanding. That we're okay with that. However, we're going to ask that when you sell, just have 2 young trees planted. So then we know that from here on out, it will be in compliance and the other people in the association will be happy. And that is that's a conditional variance, and that's something that a board can use that can be very effective in allowing you to get through a situation like that. The other is perhaps the other issue, which would be, or thing you could do, and that would be grandfathering in. Grandfathering in has no variance, and that would be just where the association said, look, we understand that that was the case, and so as long as you own the home, that won't be required. However, they may not ask that you plant the 2 trees, but that'll be something that'll have to be shared with the new buyer, and they'll have to understand that that's something that they will have to do when they purchase and buy into the association. And so that's something that the association ought to consider doing instead of just sending the letter out. Ouch, that can be very difficult to deal with, especially if you had no idea as a homeowner that this was being required. Well, hey, I'd like to take time right now. We've got someone that is on the line who has a question for me on the show. And I want to say good morning. Thanks for being on the show. Now, you've asked to be anonymous, and I'm certainly fine with that. But you just found out about our show just recently. Is that correct?
That's right. A friend of mine who was a realtor called me and told me that you were answering questions concerning townhomes and condos And so it took a little digging to get at it because you were signing off as I started to listen, so I had to find out what station it was and so forth. So,
well, I'm glad you called and you got the information, and we spoke a little bit, and I asked if you wouldn't mind being on the show to ask your question, because a lot of people deal with the same issue, and if one person's thinking of something, a lot of others are as well. So you had a question about your homeowner association as it pertains to the reserve funds that they have set aside for the association. Is that correct?
That's right. We have a situation here that needs to be addressed. It needed to be addressed like 10 years ago about a retaining wall that is crumbling. And it's going to be quite costly to repair between, well, the most reasonable estimate we got was $44,000. So we are wondering, about 4 years ago, because of a storm, we got all new roofs that the insurance paid for. So, and we understand that we need to hold money in reserve, but we're wondering if we can borrow some of this money as long as the roofs are taken care of, and how much normally is held in reserve.
Okay, that's a very good question. The first thing I would say is that it could be possible that the money that your homeowners association has already set aside might be more than enough that is needed because of having the roofs redone. Now, if the roofs needed to be redone, let's say, and they had 50% of their life done, and it cost $800,000 for those roofs to be replaced, that means a couple years ago you would have had at least $400,000 in your reserves just to take care of the roofs. Now that you have them redone, you've kind of reset the clock all again, and you can start collecting over a 30-year period. So you have other money that could be available, and so the answer could be yes, it could be possible to use and redirect some of that money for repairs to other things that need to be done. The thing that an association has to be careful with, though, and that is, and a lot of times an association, unfortunately, has been woefully underfunded for a good number of years. And so it could be that even though you got brand new roofs, the amount of money that's been set aside still isn't near enough to take care of all of the other items. And so if that's the case, it could be very difficult to be able to do that. But the association does have the ability to have money from the reserve fund, and that's the purpose for that, is for capital long-range planning and for those kinds of items that you all are mutually responsible for. And so I would gather that the retaining walls would meet that guideline. They would certainly be something that all you as homeowners are mutually responsible for, and it could be possible that money could be used from your reserves to take care of that. The most important thing would be that if it looks like your association should probably have an updated reserve plan done so that you can take a look at how much money you have sitting in your reserves to see how well off you are. Do you know if that has been done?
I don't know that. No, I don't. What I'm wondering is who determines now how much money we need to have in reserve? Is there a criteria that's done by, or exactly what is it?
Okay, that's a very good question. Before I get to answering that question, though, it looks like by our clock here, I'm going to have to take a break. So let me do that right now. Folks, don't go away. We've got a lot more of Where You Live after these messages.